So this is chapter 15, a discussion and summary of To Kill a Mockingbird. So after the decision was made, Dill can stay, but then this is where stuff starts to really get real in To Kill a Mockingbird. So a week later, a group of men come to Atticus's house and they tell him that Tom has been moved to the Maycomb jail and there is a talk of a possible lynch mob. And so why is Atticus concerned? Well, Atticus really truly believes that Tom is guilty. And so the fact that a lynch mob is coming means that they would murder Tom Robinson for raping Mayella Ewell. I'm going to say raping. I'm going to put air quotes up here. Okay. But Jim reveals to Scout that Aunt Alexandra and Atticus have been fighting about the trial. Alexandra says that Atticus is bringing shame to the family. The next evening, Atticus does some really strange things that are not normal of his evening routine, and then Atticus leaves the house in his car, which normally he walks everywhere, but he leaves in his car, and Jim and Scout find this odd, so they decide to sneak out and go see what Atticus is doing. And of course they go get Dill because Dill has to be involved in all of their crazy plans. And so they see Atticus sitting outside the jail reading a newspaper with a light hanging over his head. And it's in this moment where Scout's naivety as a child really kind of save Atticus and really kind of save herself. But so 4 cars come up while the children are hiding, and Atticus is sitting on the porch reading his paper, and this group of men come out demanding Atticus to move away from the jail door. And then Scout comes out of her hiding place, and Jim and Dill follow. And Atticus orders Jim home, but he refuses. And Scout recognizes one of the men in this group. And this is one of the more important moments of this chapter because it's going to be a character that you've heard before. And it's Mr. Walter Cunningham. And you would remember, not necessarily Mr. Walter Cunningham, but you would remember Walter Cunningham Jr., and remember the one that Scout tried to beat up in the beginning of the novel, whose father was a farmer and had to pay Atticus an entailment. Okay, that's going to be Mr. Walter Cunningham, who Scout sees here. And so she starts talking about his son and how they're in school together. And she says, you know what, Mr. Cunningham, I want you to tell him I said, hey. And Mr. Cunningham is ashamed. And he bends down and he tells Scout, I will tell him what you said. And it's important that we read about this part in the novel because here it's that moment where it hits Walter Cunningham that Atticus Finch is a father too, and he's just doing what he can to get by and get along with everything and everybody. And so Mr. Cunningham gets his companions to leave. And when they all go, we realize at the end of the novel that Mr. Underwood, the owner of the newspaper, has been sitting upstairs with a shotgun the whole time, saying he had Atticus covered during all of these shenanigans. But that's the summary. So now I want to discuss Mr. Cunningham and why he may have backed off for a second. And so if you're in this copy of the book, it's on page 204, where Scout's talking about to Jim, where a man's starting to push Jim around. Don't you touch him, I kicked the man swiftly. Barefooted, I was surprised to see him fall back in real pain. I intended to kick his shin, but aimed too high. Whoops. That'll do, Scout. Atticus put his hand on my shoulder. Don't kick folks. No, he said, as I was pleading justification. Ain't nobody gonna do Jim that way, I said. All right, Mr. Finch, get him out of here, someone growled. You got 15 seconds to get him out of here. And then we move on to page 205, where Scout starts talking to Mr. Cunningham at the bottom of page 205. Well, Atticus, I was just saying to Mr. Cunningham that entailments are bad and all that, but you said not to worry. It takes a long time sometimes, that you all ride it out together. I was slowly drying up, wondering what idiocy I had committed. Entailment seemed all right enough for living room talk. I began to feel sweat gathering at the edges of my hair. I could stand anything but a bunch of people looking at me. They were quite still. What's the matter? I asked. Atticus said nothing. I looked around and up at Mr. Cunningham, whose face was equally impassive. Then he did a peculiar thing. He squatted down and took me by both shoulders. "I'll tell him you said hey, little lady," he said. Then he straightened up and waved a big paw. "Let's clear out," he called. "Let's get going, boys." As they had come in ones and twos, the men shuffled back to their ramshackle cars. Doors slammed, engines coughed, and they were gone. And so it's in this moment that Scout literally doesn't know that she's in danger, and she's endangering not only herself, her brother, and her father, but she says, "Oh, Mr. Cunningham, tell Walter we said hey." And he gets to thinking, well, yeah, I'm a father too. I will tell Walter that you said hey, Scout. And so that childlike lens has actually saved her to a fault in this chapter. And so if you're talking about characterization here, if you need to talk more about Scout, I would definitely document on pages 202 to 207 Scout and how she acts and her characterization from this chapter. So if you have any questions on chapter 15, let me know.